Welcome to Fractional Frequency, our take on talent, people trends, and the reality of building up businesses in an economy that keeps rewriting the rules. I'm Amy Crook, founder of Stratavis.
And I'm Erin Totis, Managing Director of Talent Delivery, which basically means I live in the universe of finding the right people to make an impact for our clients fast.
Around here, we talk about the real side of HR and talent, what works, what absolutely doesn't, and how to build teams that can carry a business, not drag it down.
We'll break down trends, share the behind the scenes of scaling a consultancy from zero, and probably overshare a little because that's where the good lessons live.
So whether you're building, hiring, leading, or just trying to keep your company profitable, you're in the right place.
This is Fractional Frequency. Let's get to it.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Good evening.
It feels like it's Friday, but it's not.
It's only Tuesday.
I know. Oh, what are you going to do? But something that is definitely going to turn my day right around is that we have a guest joining us today as part of our continued homage to women in leadership. Um, and we have someone with us today whose career journey reflects both her intelligence and self-awareness. I have had the privilege of working with this person at Glassdoor and now again as part of one of my fractional clients, Game Time. She brings thoughtful perspectives to leadership. She's able to influence like I've never seen before, and she's really attuned to the realities that many professionals face as they kind of grow into their voice and their authority. Erisa, welcome to the Stratavis podcast.
Thank you. I
How'd you like
think
that
your
intro?
introduction was I'm glad it came from you because I chuckled when I when you were talking. Like, am I?
No caller.
I don't think so.
Did I mention humble? Humble also. Um, I just want to say, like, one of my funniest things of my time at Glassdoor was when you joined, and I hadn't had a meeting with you yet, but people were like, "I'm just not sure how to read Arisa," and I was like, "Oh, I gotta meet this person," and I just thought you were hilarious, super sharp, your ability to kind of assess the situation, not go in like all guns blazing, but just ask the right questions to get people thinking about things the right way was just so impressive. And I'm glad that we, even through the little lull of us not working together, we kept in touch. And I'm very grateful to benefit from your continued wisdom and your very, very good sense of humor.
Well, thank you. I have to say, and I say this not because we're doing a podcast, but you are one of the, when I think about a head of talent acquisition, you epitomize what that is.
Oh,
Um, and you do it in such like very accessible, you don't get too technical. It's just any lay person could understand, like, this is the strategy, this is the direction that we're going.
yeah. You have to keep it simple. And I think the process is
Yes,
simple. Like hiring talent is simple. But doing it well takes a lot of effort.
yes, I agree. So, and you do it well.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, enough about me. Let's talk about you. Let's start by talking through your career journey. When did you first start thinking intentionally about your career path?
I think I always wanted to do something that was data oriented, which
Mm,
is strange because the business that we are in, people often would say, but you have to be a people person. And so, because I'm a very sort of data. I'm an introverted person as well.
Mm.
It was always my on like whatever I was gonna do, that it had to be something where I could lean into data, but also not become a sort of data analyst, if that makes sense. And so when I started off my career, I stumbled into HR, but it was in compensation. And the data part of that resonated with me. I'm like,
Mm.
oh, I thought it was just about people. Turns out it is a little bit about people, but it's also about
Just a little bit.
data. So yeah, that's when I started to really, I was a little bit more intentional about it,
Hmm.
but also um, recognize that whatever I do, using data to inform and help people achieve whatever it is that they wanted to achieve was sort of like the place that I leaned in the most.
Yeah. No, that is it. Like a lot of people that I know that are in the HR space are introverted, don't, want to be front and center, or and they don't, going to a big busy like event or party is not their idea of a good time, and yet they end up in a position where they're um quietly like supporting people's growth, people's ambitions, helping businesses uh move forward. And I think maybe it's because there's this outdated perception of what HR is. It's not like we sit there running, little personnel reports and, making sure that people's time cards are correct or whatever it might be. It is more of a strategic tool for businesses now. Performance of people is so crucial to being successful, and having the right processes and systems in place to support that is like a no-brainer. So I think a lot of people I know that are in HR are self-described anti-socials.
Some of us revel in it. We know that we are, and we just kind of like, yep, that's us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not that we're like sitting there being prim and proper at the work event. It's just we don't want to talk to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Just
Nothing
kidding.
personal, no
Nothing
judgment.
personal. Don't want to talk to anyone. Um, okay, so let's go into kind of when you first stepped into leadership. What experiences shaped how you approached being in a more senior role?
Wow. I think so. I would say I've been very fortunate in my career where I've been mentored by people who've sort of taken an interest in my career,
Mm,
but also willing to invest in executive coaches.
mm,
And so I very early on in my career, I realized that I have a style, but I shouldn't be afraid to acknowledge my style.
hmm.
And I shouldn't be afraid to sort of share the way I show up.
Yeah.
And so as I was sort of growing or evolving in my career and sort of moving into a leadership role, by the time I got there, I I had an idea of what good leadership was and what it wasn't.
Mm,
Um, and to sort of acknowledge my flaws. And so the first team that I led was a team in Europe. Um, I lived in the US at the time, so I traveled a lot. And one of the things that I learned very early on in my career is that in my role, people make assumptions about an HR lead relative to the business leader that they're partnering with. and the
Mm,
level of influence that you have or do not have with that leader.
mm,
And so I was astutely aware of that. And so I would always tell people in front of the leader that I was supporting that my job is to influence,
yeah,
but ultimately it's the leader's decision.
yeah,
Um, and I try not to ever use somebody else's position in power to influence what I wanted.
yeah,
So I would rarely say something like, if I wanted something, I wouldn't say, well, Amy wants us to do this.
yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
I couldn't influence that person or that group, I I would then go back and look at the data that I had to say, what is it about the data that I have that is getting in the way of this person making a decision?
yeah. That's such a great point. I think it's very easy to lean on internal stakeholders and leaders to um, propel your point of view around an organization. And if you aren't able to influence change independently, that's not real leadership
Yeah,
because no one's following you, they're following a threat.
correct.
And that's not healthy or recommended.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned this a little bit in your in the beginning about like not being afraid to show up authentically. Um were there any moments that forced you to rethink how you showed up professionally at all?
So I remember very early on where you like there were these leaders who happened to be men,
Mm,
but they had a very strong point of view.
yeah,
And sometimes you would debate because you're trying to influence
yeah,
somebody.
yeah.
And sometimes you would get very sort of caught up in the moment.
Mm,
And I remember as I was, I had this executive coach, and the executive coach said to me, you know what, Arisa, you have to ask yourself two questions. Why are you emotionally invested in this particular issue?
mm,
Like at the end of the day, it's a business.
yeah,
If it happens, it happens. Like it's there are thousands of employees. So your point of view is a point of view, but not the point of view. That's one. And then the second was that you, these leaders that you are trying to emulate, that you perceive as being great leaders, they're not great leaders. It's not because they're of their gender, it's none of that. They're trying to get things done. There are ways that they could do it that people don't feel like they have to have a debate.
mm,
They don't feel like they have to be right. And so step back a bit and trying to figure out like what problem are you really trying to solve? Why is it important that a key stakeholder has to even agree with you? And at the end of the day, if they agree with you or not, your job is just to lay out the options. You can tell them the options that you would prefer that they take, but you don't need to, it's not, if they don't take your advice, it isn't something personal.
yeah,
Because I think oftentimes as you're building credibility with a leader, when they don't take it or they don't like it, or it may come across as they're dismissing you.
yeah,
You take it personally. It's like, oh, they don't like what I said. They don't like how I said it. I didn't have the right data. And it's just, you know what? They've heard what you've had to say and they're willing to go in a different direction. And that is okay because
yeah,
that's their job. Their
yeah,
job is to listen and take everything that you say. And so I think it just informed how I showed up.
Yeah, like more like more open and less I'm gonna die on every hill.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I also learned pretty early on in leadership is that I can feel passionately about something, but that doesn't really matter. If
Yeah,
I can't make a compelling enough case to influence the the direction that we go in, that I didn't do it. I didn't influence it, you know, like I can go back and try different approaches, or I can just accept that, you know, that's the position that they're in to make that decision. And not everything is like, in fact, most things are not life or death. Pretty much everything in
exactly.
corporate is not life or death.
And
So,
then if you, and then I was going to say, if you also think about how when you have somebody reporting to you,
mm,
right? And they're trying to influence you.
yeah,
And you were sort of, you may agree to disagree.
yeah,
I think you also learn about how that feels
yeah,
when you are the recipient of that. And so I think it's sort of recognizing that at the end of the day, people are just trying to do their best
yeah,
and get to the right result.
yeah,
And to the extent that whoever's whoever you're working with or partnering with, that's the intention that they have.
yeah,
And not to read anything more or less into it. It's, I heard you, that's great. We're going to move in this direction.
yeah. Yeah, assuming good intent is a definite one to carry. Otherwise you can end up acting a little bit wounded for no real reason. And you know, just talking about how you lead other people, I think when I look back on the managers that I've managed, I kind of prided myself in bringing people in that were so different to me,
Hmm.
and that had really different perspectives and thought about things in different ways. Because if I just sit there with people that are like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, we should do that. Nothing's really getting better. It's not a it's just a cosign of like my own ideas. And
Hmm.
I don't really need that. What I need is people around me that have a point of view that's different so that we can get to an outcome that's better than what it would have been if it was just me thinking about it. And I think that's really was hard for me to get my head around, like upwards. It was easy for me to do for the folks that I managed because that's how I like to operate. I love honesty and transparency. And if you tell me this idea is garbage, then I'm gonna listen to you because I don't want to make it, I don't want to do something that's not gonna work. Um, so let's figure it out. So when I was having those conversations as I moved up in my career with like C-level people, and you're explaining like why something is not necessarily the right pathway forward and they choose to go that way anyway, I was like, why would you do that? just, I'm just like perplexed. And but you just have to learn that, you know what? The world will keep on spinning. It's okay. It's your role to offer advice and guidance, and you know, you'd be remiss in your role not to offer your point of view, but if it's not listened to or if it's not in line with what the, you know, the bigger plan is that you might not even be privy to, you just have to accept it and keep going.
Yeah.
So my last question for this section is kind of along that same lines around leadership, but just as you've grown in your career, and the decisions that you've made, how has the definition of success changed for you?
I think And maybe because I am introverted, and so I have this kind of weird way of looking at things. One of the things I realized is success for me is being satisfied in the work that I've done,
Mm,
like a sense of accomplishment. It's less about the title.
yeah.
And I don't want to even say money, but sometimes if you are doing things that you mentally are not healthy for you, and you're in an environment that's not healthy for you,
Yeah, yeah.
it's almost like you have an illness, right? So you have all this is me. Like, let's say I'm a gazillionaire and I have all this money, but I have something that ails me. I don't get to enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
And so I realized not too early, but there was a point in my career where I just said, I want to be around people who are smarter than me, who would challenge me, but where I can have fun.
Yeah.
And so I made choices. Sometimes I'm like, was that really not really a smart move? But then I love the people that I work with. And so I've always been if something isn't working for me, I quickly will remove myself from that situation.
Mm,
I don't like, I don't, especially if I feel like I'm not going to have the impact that I want, right? And so I sort of just move on. I don't get to the point where I'm sort of constantly whinging over the fact of one thing versus the other.
hmm.
It is what it is, but I like the people, and that makes up for everything else. And so I always, oftentimes, I'll have people come to me and they're either upset with their role or their job, and I'll say, why don't you just leave?
Yeah. I know. It's like they've never even considered that as an option.
It's like, why? I'm like, well, every time I talk to you, you're not happy. It cannot be emotionally. It's not good for you. It's not, you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
part of being a leader also is sort of knowing when to extricate yourself from situations where you're no longer adding value.
Mm,
And so I do think, and I used to say this all the time to people, is you need to spend some time being introspective. Because when you spend time thinking about yourself a little bit, it, you then start to think about the choices and the trade-offs that you're willing to make
Mm.
to
yeah.
be effective in your role. Because I do think if you had a man, a leader who'd always say, if you don't, if you don't, if you don't say it, you'll act it out, or something to that effect. And I do believe that is true. Like I've worked with a leader once where she was on a Monday. I don't know what happened on the weekend, but and this was very on early on in my career. On a Monday, she'd always be upset.
Mm.
No.
Always. And then it was it's like, I don't know if I want to do that. And I loved it was a group of analysts that we worked, and we would joke about it. But after a while, we're like, I don't think this is healthy for us. I mean, we could get together on the weekends. We don't need to have this job.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of, we all kind of left, but I think, I don't know if this leader understood that clearly either she didn't like whatever the issue was, it was impacting the entire team.
Yeah.
And I do think there are times like if she just stepped back and just said, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore.
It
Mm.
would
As
have
soon as
been
I walked through
better.
the door, these people pissed me off.
And I
So
love what you said, Erisa, about is this healthy for me? And that the answer to that question could change over time because
Yeah.
people grow and companies change and getting to a sort of a maturity point where you can be honest with yourself about whether this situation is serving you and vice versa. I think that's a really powerful point in someone's leadership journey. I love
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
I want to shift us a little bit. We've been talking about sort of openness and the art of influence. And something that comes up in conversations for Amy and I is that people a lot of times will consider, sometimes on their path to leadership or in a leadership role, that they feel torn between being likable with their peers and stakeholders and being credible. And so I want to sort of pose that question to you and ask if you would share a little bit about how you reconcile that balance internally for yourself. And perhaps, if you've counseled business leaders on that topic, what are some of the pearls of wisdom that you might share?
Hmm, not sure if that pearls of wisdom. I would say for me is credibility. I'd prefer that you perceive me as somebody who is credible. And and that may evolve into likability, but I because I'm not a this may sound weird, because I'm not a people person per se, I don't I don't I don't go into situations hoping that you would like me.
Mm.
Actually, I sometimes go into situations thinking, I don't know if these people even want me around. And so, how do I demonstrate value
Mm.
so that they know that any amount of time they spend from me will be something worth their time?
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that way of thinking about it. And I think that that could help someone get out of their head too, as I even consider, meeting various stakeholders and leaders for the first time. Sometimes you can feel intimidated either by someone's background or what you've heard about their style, or where they come from. But if you can set that aside and think instead about how can I add value to this topic or this conversation, I think that would help people feel a lot more confidence and power than maybe they would otherwise. I want to know, have there been moments, Arissa, in your career where protecting your authority or credibility meant risking being perceived as either unlikable or maybe difficult to know or difficult to work with?
I think the way it has shown up is so people assume that I may have a very fixed point of view. In other words, I have a very rigid point of view, and
Mm.
it's hard for me to shift. It's quite the opposite.
Mm.
I may be, to use Amy's words, I may at times be passionate about something, but I'm not. I'm not emotionally invested to the point where I don't. I would say, well, if I can't do X, well, it means I'm walking. I wouldn't do that at all. I think so there have been periods where people may be reticent to do something for whatever reason. Um, Change just in general is hard for most people. And so my approach has always been try it out.
Mm.
You have nothing to lose if you just try it out. If you don't like it, you may learn something that you didn't know before, or it would validate the fact that it was a bad idea to begin. You know what I mean? You have
Yeah.
nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And some people will say, well, I have time to lose. I'm like, not really.
Mm.
You,
Yeah.
you, you, you sort of just being open to the idea of doing something different. And to the extent that I can help facilitate that process, so you are not doing it alone, and
Mhm.
I'm helping to sort of help you through that process, becomes my responsibility. But I think there have been times where I've worked with leaders and they've said, "Well, I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we've done it before and it didn't work." And, or I've heard them say that to other people. And I'll always remind the leader, if you hired somebody to come in and drive change,
Mhm.
telling them when they're driving change to be very cautious around how you drive change is a bit awkward. And it's happened to me where I've joined a company, they asked me to go do something, I did it, and the feedback I got was, yeah, that was a little bit too fast. We didn't think you were going to do that. And then they're like, but that was the whole reason why you hired me.
Mm,
Um, I think sometimes when that happens, um, I think it's again just being open.
Mm.
And again, going back to not getting so emotionally invested
Yeah.
that you start to play mental games with yourself because
mm,
that's not healthy either. And the reason why I keep on going back to the emotional part of it is leaders sometimes underestimate the way that comes across. And so I always, it's, yes, you have a sense of urgency, you want to deliver results, you won't, there are time commitments, I get all of that, but at the end of the day, you are working with people. And whilst I am not a people person, I am very cognizant of how that impacts people. And so it's sort of being mindful and recognizing that sometimes people are not where you are in that moment.
Mm.
So I may want to drive change, I may want to do all of that, but I need to bring people along. And that sometimes is more difficult than the change itself.
Mm. I love what you said about just an openness. As I think about even my experiences, the times when I've learned are not the times where I came up with all the ideas and implemented
mm,
everything I already knew how to do. And so I think there's certainly a silver lining in that, and that people learn and grow in those moments too. And so I want to pick into one more thing, Arissa. It's Women's History Month, and so we are focused on that topic all month long. And I'm curious, you've counseled many leaders across executive levels, mid-level leadership. Do you feel like women in these positions feel a particular or a different kind of pressure to either maintain a softness in their style or temper their assertions or perspectives?
No, I've not met women who do that. There's no tempering.
I was gonna say I'm refreshed by that answer.
I do. Here's the thing. And so how do I don't so I without offending anybody.
You're not gonna offend anyone.
I do think sometimes. So I've had the privilege to work with some phenomenal female leaders. Just like you're a great human, and it just so happens you're a woman.
Mm,
Um, but I grew up in an environment where you are a great leader. You just happen to be a woman kind of environment.
mm,
Um, and so there have been times where I have shared this with a female leader where the people on her team assumed because she was a woman, she should be, air quotes, more nurturing.
mm.
Oh, I've come
And
across that too. What they really need is a mother hen. Huh?
exactly.
Like,
And
what? That's
and
not,
or
not a
I've
job.
also had people say to me, wow, Risa, the fact that you're in HR and given your role, you should be a little bit more nurturing. To which I would say, are you a lamb that I need to nurture? Like I need to guide. I do think that there is a perception that women need to behave that way.
Mm,
And I would say I think the women that I've been fortunate enough to work with recognize the idea that I just want to be a good leader.
Mm.
I'm trying to be an authentic leader that is really good at what they do.
mhm,
And so sort of making sure that they retain that in how they lead and not allowing other people's perception of what a woman leader needs to do, I think speaks volumes about them. Like you want any leader to have empathy. You want every leader to be able to help navigate and again be empathetic. I don't, and so I think the one thing I always tell women who are very on in their career is don't aspire to be a to be the next Steve Jobs.
Mm.
Don't aspire to be the next Jeff Bezos. Aspire to be a good leader, a great leader, but one that reflects who you are as a person.
yeah.
Try to be that authentic self, not to the point where if your authentic self is to be disparaging to people and rude, not that version, but the version where you're respectful. Because I think at the end of
Yeah.
the day, you just want a leader who's going to be respectful, um, can help navigate and help create an environment where you can thrive.
Mm. Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And, I consider some of the roles that I play in my own life of, wife and mother. And I think those have maybe helped me build empathy over time as a leader. And at the same time, I'm so spent on nurturing by the end of the weekend that when Monday rolls around, I don't know how much more I have left in me for other people around me in a professional capacity. And so I think that's a refreshing observation and assertion that it's not about that. It should not be about that. And it's more about your effectiveness.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
want to I want to just cover a couple of kind of quick questions here, so that are building on this topic a little bit. And so the first is to expand on likability and effectiveness. Do you think that organizations reward likability in a leader more or less than effectiveness?
I think it depends on the organization. So organizations that are relationship based, likability, although people won't acknowledge it that way. But I once had somebody say to me, why don't you smile a lot?
Hmm.
It would be, I'm like,
Love that one.
right there is a reason not to smile. Um, and I think the reason why, just going back to what we just talked about, is I do think likability, particularly if you're a woman, um, I think people want to make sure that you are likable, you're accessible. Um, enough, by the way, sometimes those comments are coming from other women.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably more often than not, they're coming from other women. Um, and so I do think depending on the organization, yes, it's your likability and the perception of what that means. The way I translate likability is that if you ask me to go do something, I do it with a smile. I don't question you.
Hmm.
And I know that's not what it means, but that's my interpretation of it. I think I would rather, I don't want people to dislike me, but I would
Oh.
like to think that this, again, just going back to what I said at the beginning of our conversation, is that I'm credible in that I say what I'm going to do and I do it.
Hmm.
I provide value to the organization and the leader. And I hope that translates into likability. But at the end of the day, I would say what to me Trout's likability is respect.
Yeah.
Because you can like me, but you may not respect me a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And that
yeah.
damages your credibility, that damages your ability to influence and navigate an organization. I was just reflecting on like your answer. Sorry, Aaron, just to hop in a little bit in here. Um, and it's an interesting concept, and I know it came up as like one of our topics that we wanted to talk about during Women's History Month because there is this tendency to think of it as a challenge in the career span of women. But you know where I've seen it be much more damaging is with men. And the rewarding of like interesting behaviors that appeal to a very niche group, but you see that when you see unhealthy behaviors get rewarded, I think that's really damaging across the whole organization. So more than like rewarding likability and effectiveness, I think there's other behaviors in the workplace that are probably more prevalent that deserve a little bit more attention. And that's where you hope that like executive coaching and experience and just a few more spins around the earth will like help people get to that place. Um, but I mean, that's just my take, and I could be like alone in thinking about this, but I do think in leadership, there's such a balance between um, not likability necessarily, but when if you have like a way of delivering things or dealing with things that impacts your effectiveness, no matter how much you might be bringing to the table, then it's like net negative, in my opinion.
Yeah. I will say this though. Have you ever heard, like I oftentimes, sometimes I'll hear people say, I really like this person, but they can't do their job. Really great
Yes.
person, love hanging around them. But,
Yeah.
and
Well,
so yeah, I think I do think it's an interesting proposition, if you will, right?
mm,
You would like to think the more effective people are, the more likable they are.
Hmm.
yeah.
Um, I don't, I- but yeah, I've seen. Look at it the other way around. You can have people who they people don't like, but they're very effective in their role and they get things done.
Yeah.
One extreme is not good,
No.
but I do think it. I mean, I'm sure you both have observed it and seen it in your career. Like it happens a lot of times in sales, right?
Hmm.
The brash salesperson, and people like, oh, I can't stand working with this person.
Yeah.
But they're the ones who get the deals. They're
Yeah.
the ones who get it done.
Top
And so I do
performer.
exactly, right? Um, I I think the question is, and now that you say this, and this again may not be fair, but I often hear that type of description around men. In other words, it's okay if a male person is a
Yeah.
go-getter.
Yes.
I don't need to like them. I
Right.
don't know if the same applies to a woman. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's just my very limited experience.
Hmm.
No, I think there's a definite like differential measuring stick. Like I definitely think that there is. And it's not something that I've particularly let bother me or phase me in my career. I think like you, Arisa, I've been lucky to work with some like incredibly strong, thoughtful, sharp women who kind of led the way in how to conduct yourself in business settings, and how to influence without having to change who you are as a person. Um, and but I still think there's a different measure for success based on like the likability. But where I see it be more of a challenge is on the male side because yeah, there's no there's no limit to how off the scales some people can be if they're perceived by the right people as being productive.
Yeah.
Hmm. And there are tons of dimensions to that too. I think function and role type has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
I'm having flashbacks in this moment to stepping into my first internship ever at an investment management firm and walking onto the floor, and most people are in suits. This was pre-pandemic era, people dressed up to go to work. And the person who was sat right next to my desk was in this like crumpled t-shirt, like those like half-washed commercials and a pair of sweatpants and tennis shoes. And I remember being sort of puzzled about that. My boss looked at me and goes, "Well, he's like a senior staff level engineer. He's the best one we've gotten, so it's okay for him to dress like that, but you can't." And no one else can. And so I think there's maybe layers of privilege in the way that people show up, in the way that people interact.
And like
That are balanced with
it's
their
not a
body.
big deal and like no one cares really, but at the same time it's not consistent. And there's
Hmm.
pockets of that, I think you're right, like all over the place, in varying degrees. Like
Mhm.
and it goes back to it works both ways. They're not dying on hills and they're not sweating small stuff. Um, like you also, can't be worried about your personal like experience. Like you've got to just embrace the position that you're in. Um, I I do think corporate America is fascinating. It's very different, in my opinion, to what the working world was like. Mind you, it's been 10 years plus since I was back in the UK, but it's very different to what I experienced for the first kind of 15 years of my career. The politics, the navigating personalities, the charade um of certain things is it took some getting used to. Have we got time for me to digress with like a funny little story?
Of course. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So this this was like my first. So I had always been in staffing, salesy environment, right? Like very, you're as good as the month you're in, this type of, very like powerhouse environments. And then I moved over to the US and I started working in corporate. And then I'd managed teams in staffing before, and then found myself working for Erin. And she gave me some feedback in one of my performance reviews. I don't know if you'll even remember that. You probably do remember this because I'm sure I've brought it up to you before. But it was Amy comes to the table with great ideas and she knows it. And the the real like opportunity, like you can get people from A to B, but the opportunity is like how they feel about the journey. And I
Aw.
thought that was like a really good way of putting like sometimes Amy, you're a bit of an asshole.
No, I think the point there is that people are much more likely to buy in when they feel like the idea is theirs, or at least
Yes.
partially, even
Yeah.
if it was yours all along. Hmm. But no, I don't remember that. But it is making me smile because I can imagine, I can imagine that conversation. And you are brilliant. You come up, you can just look at a problem and diagnose what's wrong and what should be done about it much quicker than most people, I would venture to say. And there's something about that that I think is so special, and that some people are maybe intimidated by.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I was kind of just going to sit back and see if you had any more great things to say about me because I never get tired of hearing them. Um, but no, it was really good feedback. It really helped me like understand, okay, I move quickly and sometimes I need to give like people the opportunity to come along the journey with me. And I think that really benefited me as I kind of went on in my career.
Mhm.
All right. So as we kind of wrap up, I'd love to ask Erisa some key takeaways for our audience out there. What is one mindset shift that helped you to pull away from emotionally investing in decisions and outcomes um, at work?
I uh just that, just that. Like, why am I why do I care?
Yeah.
Like really, I remember a there was an issue um that I had, and so we're on a call, we had a number of senior leaders, and I said, I don't think this is a great idea. And they're like, why? And I will say this, here's a thing that sometimes we forget. Sometimes people don't really need to ask your opinion. So the fact when somebody actually takes the time to
Yeah.
ask for your opinion, that in of itself, you should appreciate. So, um, they asked for my point of view, and I felt a little bit strongly about this particular issue. And I gave three reasons why,
Hmm.
because I was closest to it.
Yeah.
And every single person, they were above me, said, yeah, no, we're going to move forward in this other direction.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I was right.
Hmm.
And so I remember the leader. So we ended up at, we ended up having to do something that I now had to take care of.
Yeah.
Think about it. This was not my idea. You did what you wanted to do, and now I have to go execute it.
Mm.
And so I remember one of the ladies coming up to me and saying, so don't you want to say it? I'm like, say what? Just say it. I'm like, say what? I told you so. I'm like, no, you said it yourself. But honestly, I learned from that
Yeah.
experience. One is I appreciate the fact that these senior leaders asked for my opinion.
Yeah.
And the other is I think they all learned from it.
Mm.
So in the future, it was, look, you want to do the right thing, but sometimes my mantra is no good deed goes unpunished. So you may want to do it, but you do it at the expense of other people.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need to stick to the process or the policy or whatever it is that you all agreed to. And so what I always tell people is in that moment, was I disappointed? I was like, this is going to turn out interesting. But I wasn't upset. I wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe this. They're going to
They've
be wrong.
ignored me. They're gonna
And,
they're gonna regret
I
this.
just, I think the fact that these leaders took the time to get my perspective,
Yeah.
they heard it. And I don't know if I would have made a different decision if I were in their shoes. And so I think it was kind of interesting moving forward. Like whenever we had something similar, people would, it was like, "Oh, what is the music?" I'm like, no, we're not doing that. But I
You can
just feel
learn.
like, but what I learned from that um, is it's okay for people to hear your point of view. And whether you're right, wrong, or indifferent, they took the time because some leaders don't even ask.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
And so that's my point of view that if somebody asks you for your opinion, that's okay. They don't have to take it, but don't sometimes I hear people get so upset that they're not listening to me and so it's like, okay, that's that you can ask them why they made the decision, but if you allow your own abilities and the person that you are um to get so caught up in how somebody decided to do something different than what you proposed,
Mhm.
then I would say and somebody's gonna hold me to this. That's a problem, not a them problem.
Yeah, yeah. If you're going to be successful navigating big personalities in big roles with big responsibilities, you can't have a lot of precious moments,
Hmm.
where you worry too much about what do they think about me now? Why didn't they take that recommendation? Um, I think one of the greatest lessons, anybody who's going from that like manager level up to dealing more with executives, particularly, is like learning to disagree and commit and not take emotion into it will benefit you so much more. Otherwise, you end up being like that person you mentioned before. I was like, oh, I hate it here. Go leave. Go do something else.
I had a leader that I worked with, and she was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a disagreement. Well, not a disagreement. They had decided to go in one direction, and they weren't sure how this leader would react. And everybody had assumptions about who this leader was.
Mm,
And she didn't get upset. She didn't like the decision, but she owned it as if it was hers.
mm.
To the point where I even forgot that that wasn't her idea. Like she embraced it. She
Yeah,
came up with things that the leader hadn't even thought about. Like
that's awesome.
honestly. And like when I think about leaders who disagree and commit, she is somebody who I model myself around.
Yes.
Like she emotionally disconnected herself from the decision and said, this is a business decision and this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And and I just find that people who do that are just they end up being really great leaders because part of being a leader is you may disagree with something, but you really have to own that decision as if it's yours.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that I again I've been fortunate to work with people who are just phenomenal. Like in every single role that I've been in, I'm like, I'm lucky.
Yeah.
So,
And
and I also get to people like you, Amy and
yeah.
Erin.
And also meaning that we're not phenomenal.
That's my point. You are phenomenal.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, let's be honest. In every company, there's both ends of the scale, and you have to take it as it comes, and that's fine. But I think that lesson around take the emotion out of it, commit, like give it your best, think through, okay, this is what we have ahead of us. How can I make this better? They are the most successful leaders because they are able to think much more objectively around a situation on more of a global scale, if you will, than just
Hmm.
how this impacts me.
Yeah,
Because the higher up you get, the less you matter. It's the whole that matters. Um,
exactly.
and that's just a transition that not everyone can make. But the ones that do, they do great things. And you are definitely someone, Arisa, that I look up to as someone who can see the bigger picture, asks the right questions. You're very good at this, like guiding thoughts so that people can come to a conclusion that feels authentic to them, but you've given them the right structure to think through a problem effectively. Which, that's that's where HR people teams really come into their own is when they've got that skill, but it's not everywhere. But I love watching you execute.
Well, thank you.
What a loving guys today. Like
I know.
so much nice things said. Erin's little speech about me. I've had a couple speeches about Rita. Like, wow, we're feeling it today. Thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I hope everybody who's listening has also gotten something out of it. Um, we normally at this point would ask like where people can follow you or like get in touch with you. Um, I I mean, is the response don't?
You know,
I'm kidding.
I just sort of not a people person. Um,
I know.
no, or just they can contact me on LinkedIn.
Yes, perfect. Find Arisa on LinkedIn, reach out, ask her any questions. She'd love to connect.
I like people. Let's end on that note.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.